Yeah, we're live. It is 317. 317 LS heads. Today, we are going to do another what if. If you caught the last live feed, we did a what if for Pontiac. So, what if Pontiac did certain things with their cylinder heads and their combinations, and what if they did a 303 Trans Am or fun stuff. It was a good live feed. So, I wanted to do the same thing. We're going to do a what if for Ford stuff today. And the first one is, what if maybe we'll wait till guys get here. We'll start off with something easy. So one of the things I wonder about being a 5-liter Mustang owner, original owner, I have a 1988 5-liter LX Mustang because they're better than GTs in every way possible. My question is, given the fact that they were competing initially against the 5-liter carbureted, the L69s, and then the LB9s, the TunePort Chevy Camaros, but then also the 350s. Once Chevrolet introduced or started offering the 350 and the IROCs, then they had to compete against 350s. So they did well. They were fairly lightweight and stuff, and it was a good matchup for stock stuff. My question is, what if Ford, instead of giving us the 5-liter 302, or in addition to giving us the 5-liter 302, which did fairly well, what if they did a 5.8-liter Mustang? So what if they did all of the, and I'm not talking about a wildly aftermarket kind of thing. I'm talking about what if they did basically the motor that was in the Lightning, but with the HO camshaft. I don't know if the Lightning had the HO camshaft or not, but a 5.8-liter short block with the HO camshaft with GT40 heads and a Cobra style intake manifold, let's say. And heck, if you want to get crazy, since they offered them on the Cobras, throw in some roller rockers, get crazy about it. But I think, instead of the 225 horsepower deal, and they did do a 351 Cobra R version, but as a production thing, I'm sure they could have been certainly with those heads on there and the HO camshaft and rockers on it. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't have been 260 or 270, probably at the flywheel, or the way that Ford measures it. The GT40P or the GT40 or the GT40P heads would add a good bit. I mean, they would, and especially if you added the Cobra style intake manifold, which they did later on the Cobra and the Cobra R. But with a 351, the reason that I would like it is those other things would be good. I mean, having better heads on it, definitely a step up from the factory heads, which are terrible. Even with the stock camshaft, GT40 heads can be worth 20 or 30 horsepower. So it's a pretty good gain from just the heads. And then you throw in the Cobra intake manifold, the upper and lower, and the 65 millimeter throttle body. We know that that's going to be worth at least 10 or 15 over the stock HO upper and lower intake manifold. And throw in some rockers in there, for good measure. And probably some kind of, like, maybe an 80 millimeter, the factory 80 millimeter mass air meter, something like that. And then the thing that I would like about it is, sure, those other things would add more power. The cam or the intake manifold, the cylinder head upgrade, that would definitely add power, and we would want that. But the other thing that it would do is the 351 would add a ton more torque compared to the 302. Now, the 302 is fairly torquey because it was a long runner intake manifold, and it had very let's face it, those heads are terrible. I was going to say that, but it's got small ports and small valves, and so it makes good torque. It doesn't. Any head that we put on there makes way more torque, so they're not good. But the 351 being bigger, being 50 cubic inches bigger, would offer a lot more average power production, a lot more low speed power. If nothing else, you just spin the tires more at the beginning. But a 351 Mustang with a T5 transmission back in the day, that would have been pretty sporty. I mean, that would have been pretty cool. I think it would have been more than a match for the L98 350 IROCs of the day. Now, maybe if they would have put a manual trans behind that in the Camaros, that would have been better. But I think the motor that I'm talking about with GT40 heads or GT40P heads and that Cobra intake manifold on a 351, I think it would make more than the L98 does. And so it would have been interesting. Probably would have required a hood scoop or lowering the engine down. But that would have been okay, because that would have been, if you got the 5.8 liter HO 5.8 liter, then you got a hood, you paid for the hood scoop too thing, maybe a cowl hood or something, which would have made the thing look kind of awesome. So let me know what you guys think about that. The next one is, what if they took the Boss 351, which in my opinion, especially back then, the best performance small block and the most powerful performance small block that they made. And the guys will argue with me, oh no, a Boss is a big block. It's not. It's a 351. It has a shorter deck than the Windsor that you call a small block, and it has the same bell housing, bolt pattern stuff. So it's not a big block. It's not even a mid block like the 351 and the 400Ms. It's not even that, because those have a big block bolt pattern, but the Cleveland doesn't. And so the Cleveland, a 351 Cleveland, is a small block, just like a Boss 302 is a small block. Now in 69 and 70, we had the Boss 302 in what is, in my opinion, arguably the best looking Mustang body that they made. And then when they went to the Boss 351, they went to a bigger, heavier car that the body style was not, it doesn't get the accolades that the Shinoda body did. And so what if they, came out with the Boss 351 a year earlier? Because it was already done. I mean, they had already done all the development on it for the year before. But what if they put that Boss 351 in that I'm assuming, I haven't verified this, but I'm assuming a lighter weight. And if nothing else, it's just I like it better. I mean, the Boss 351 is an awesome car. Don't get me wrong. It looks muscular and all that, but I like the Shinoda body style. I like the Boss 302 better. I think it looks cooler. You could put the little hood scoopy on it and like the Cobra Jet stuff. But what if they did that? So would that have helped them with sales? It certainly would have helped with performance, because a Boss 351 motor in the same car as a Boss 302 would kill the Boss 302. The Boss 351 makes more peak power. It can rev every bit in any sort of production vehicle, can rev every bit as high as a Boss 302 does. And it has, like the 302 versus the 351 that we talked about in the 5-liter deal, a 351 just makes a lot more average power. So that always wins races. Obviously we're assuming that you can put the power down, but a Boss 351 in that body style, I think kind of would be the ultimate Mustang. I mean, it'd be nice to take and put that back in like a 65 or 66 Shelby body, which I also like, the fastbacks, but in that 69, 70 body, very, very cool. So let me know what you think about that. Also, the final thing that we want to talk about on the what if Ford actually made the 427 camera motor a production motor, and we could get that in like a Torino Talladega. To me, that would be awesome, because the side benefit of it, I mean, that would be an awesome vehicle. And if you could get it in a Mustang or whatever, also very, very cool. The closest thing we have, I think, to that would be like the Boss 429. But if you could get that camera motor and they made a production version of it that wasn't a super racy version, and it was reliable and all the things that you would want out of that kind of motor, if you had that motor and it was a production motor available in Torino Talladegas or Mustangs or whatever, or Comets, imagine that, a little Ranchero or whatever, and you had that, then it might qualify for NASCAR. So what would have happened if they would have made that a production car and NASCAR would have allowed that motor? Because that's probably what made their decision to not make it a production motor. I mean, it might have been overly complicated and expensive too. That probably went into it. But if that would have been a production motor and would have been allowed in NASCAR, do you think that motor was the equal of the Hemi at the time? I mean, eventually they were going to go away from the big blocks anyways, because they were going too fast for those cars. Those cars were just going too fast for the safety measures that they had back then. But you could have had that, and then it would have raced against the big block Chevy stuff. You could have had an all aluminum ZL1 motor, that kind of thing. But against the 426 Hemis in the Superbirds and things like that. So that's my other what if is if that motor was and that's probably the farthest away from being a potential production motor, I think, for all of these super wazoo things, because a lot of guys tried overhead cam motors, and some of them even tried 4-valve versions of them, and so they did all these kinds of experimental things, because guys back then knew they were smart, they knew what to do, and they knew, hey, look, it would be cool is if we had a lot more head flow, and let's have a lot more head flow. So essentially that's like the tunnel port stuff, and it eventually became the Boss stuff, so that the Boss stuff could at least have some semblance of more so than the tunnel port, but so the Boss stuff could at least have some semblance of drivability. And that's why when I was talking about the Boss 351, the 351 is better to take advantage of what people generally consider to be oversized ports on the Boss deal. But camera motor would be awesome. It would sound awesome. It could make lots of power, and in production form could be, one of the highest end, let's say, production big blocks that they made. That kind of displacement would be pretty cool. So let me know what you guys think in the comments on our what ifs. Good top bitch. Rip that junk 351 out and put in the 2.3 liter. Yep. Wales is in the house. Sykes, Robert. Save a lot of swaps from needing to be done. 351 Boss, not much better. Small block out there. Yeah, I haven't found one that made more power. I haven't tested them all. I would like to test the 350 HO Pontiac, and then maybe the, is the 400 a Pontiac a small block? Not if you ask the Pontiac guys, but it's just a change in displacement. The block is the same. So are they all small blocks? Are they all big blocks? Is it none of that? My mom had a Boss 351 way back, but it got trashed in an accident with a semi blowing a tire, ran over the front of the car. It was some weird Cobra car. I'll have to ask. A Boss 351, if it was a production car, would have only been in the Mustang. 351 would have been around 285 horsepower, 345 foot-pounds of torque. Are you talking about, you must be talking about the later HO 351 that I was talking about, right? She traded the 351 for the King Cobra, and that got ran over. Okay, yeah, King Cobra would be a later one, but also as sticker packages go, I like those cars. Boss 351 is a beast. Heck, there was a more powerful small block in the muscle car area, or was there? Yeah, I don't think so. 360 cubic inches or less. Yeah, well, I don't know if any of the AMC stuff was there. So would a 390 AMC count for that? Or 401? 69 to 70 would have been the Boss, but 67 to 68 would have been even better. It's lighter. Yeah, you're not going to get me there. I don't like those body styles. I like the 69 70 body styles way better than the 67 68s. And if you want light, you should put it in a 65. Speaking of a 351, drop by the house around garbage day, Richard. Get started taking out the trash. Sorry to be off topic. There's no topic, man. It's just just us, just chatting. Could you please test your 383 LS with hooker 2.5-inch collector and full exhaust versus header with 2.5-inch full exhaust? Daily driver trying to keep cab noise down. Well, why do you think that will be different than the test that I already did? And I don't have that motor or the exhaust anymore, so that's not going to happen. But I'm just curious what you think will happen with a 2.5-inch collector, because I don't have a header with a 2.5-inch collector, but the exhaust had a reduction in the collector size because the header has a 3-inch collector on it. M code 351 Cleveland is the Boss 351 of 71. I'm wondering why Ford didn't offer the Cobra Jet in 1970 Mustang Cougar or make a 460 Super Cobra Jet. in 1970. A 460 would have been good. The 1970 351C is the Boss 351 of 71. They didn't offer a solid lifter 351 Cleveland in 1970 that I'm aware of. The M code one was a I thought that the M code version was in 1970 was a hydraulic flat tappet. Always wanted to see a Mercury Cyclone. Yeah, that would be good. Love the big blocks, boost compression makeup for the weight. My 4B Cleveland were the only small blocks to impress and scare me. I still have 4 of them. Nice. 66 fastback and 70 fastback were the best looking. I would agree with that. At 65 and 66 would have been the same, but the 66 would have had the, like on the Shelbys, would have had the open windows and not the louvers on them, the see-through windows. Forgot to say cast iron exhaust manifolds. You don't like the 67 and 68? I don't like those. In fact, not at all. I think Eleanor is a terrible looking car. I don't like Steve McQueen's car either. I don't like any of those. How do you build a ridiculous popcorn pop machine? Solid roller. Look at me, exhaust 351 for manageable price. Poncho blocks are not all the same. Large general cranks delineated the big block size, at least in the East Bay engine shops. 400 down was small. 421 and up was large. Yeah, I know when they changed the bearing size. So the 400 then sneaks in as a small block because the 400 is going to do pretty well, I think. Did they make a Ram Air 4 400? Richard, how are you able to do all this testing? Who supplies you with a dyno and engines and all the parts? That's me. Westech doesn't supply the stuff that I test is usually mine unless I borrow something from Westech. 351 2V, 250 horse. 70s was the death of the Mustang. Ram Air, there was a Ram Air 4 400. So a Ram Air 4 400 would probably do really well compared to, say, a LT1 350 or a 365 horse 327. I mean, it's gonna kill them in torque production. We do dyno testing. I normally do dyno testing at Westech. That's where most of the engine dyno stuff comes from, or where I did most of the engine dyno testing. Westech doesn't supply that, if that's what you're inferring. I really enjoyed my last video on Ellis heads. I'm going to do a 302 Tickford Windsor soon. They're an Australian special. I like the overall size of them. Do they make their, is that a head that they do? There's lots of good heads out there. The CHI 3V stuff is really good. I've used a couple of theirs. I've always been, I mean, and you know, you don't have to ask me. Just look what Kazi did with all of them. The 400 I have in my Ventura has more airflow than a Ram Air 4 and more compression than a Ram Air 3 size cam. Should be fun in a Ventura. Yep. Ram Air 4 was a 400. I don't know of any Ram Air 4s. The 455 was a Super Duty. 350 didn't have a Ram Air option. Okay. Well, that's why I asked. I didn't know if they only had a Ram Air 3 version was my point. Special yoke options on our Australian Ford, so-called GT heads, spitter ports and valve sizes. Then better than production ones, are you saying? And better than production, are Chris, are you talking about Cleveland heads? Clevelandia? Your package has shipped. It's on its way. Ram 3 is a D port. Ram 2, Ram 4, HO, and Super Duty are all round ports. Would you be interested in customer supplied parts and putting it into a video, cams, turbos? What is it you're wanting to see? You're wanting some combination tested, I'm imagining. So what is that? How many years ago did Yellow Bullet forums go downhill? You used to be able to get some good answers and opinions. Can't do social media. I was never part of Yellow Bullet. I never ever went on there to try to find answers to stuff. So I don't know when it started or if it's still going on, or I don't really know much about it. I mean, I've heard people reference it, but I don't know. I'm not that familiar with it. Built the 5.3 LS for turbos, meaning filed the rings properly, but now I want to run nitro with a stock bottom end. Hold up. Do you want to run nitromethane or do you want to run nitrous oxide? Could you test Hooker 2.5-inch cast exhaust manifolds on your 383? I don't have a 383 anymore. Seen tests with 2.25 cast iron Hooker exhaust manifolds, but I've not seen testing with 2.5. No Windsor heads. Rockford was an option company who modified factory vehicles for customers who wanted more handling and power. Oh, okay. So was it like an AMG is for Mercedes or Celine or somebody like that? Nitrous oxide, yeah, you can run, if you put ring gap in it, you can run nitrous on it. You can't make anywhere near the power with nitrous that you can by adding a turbo, but you can run, decent shots. Tickford. Okay, I've heard of Tickford. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we do need a poll. So thanks, sir. I forgot. Really? Okay, I'm just gonna have to get rid of the question mark. Okay, if the 427 Cammer was a production motor, would the 427 Cammer Torino be the best car ever? Would it be the best car Ford ever made? Let me know. I'm a big fan of the Torino Talladega. Get away! Yes, like AMG, same as HSV for the Holdens. Okay. Fun Pontiac fact: it's easy to hide a fogger under the manifold, and nobody would ever suspect it. In a Pontiac, pre-Ram R4 was simply Ram Air, and 68 was the first Ram Air marketing. In May of 68, the heads would become Ram Air 4 came out, claimed 10% better exhaust flow than the D ports. Was that the only change? Did they only change the exhaust flow? Greetings from Chick-fil-A. I do like Chick-fil-A. Comet, Fairlane, or Cougar. A big block Cougar is really cool. I just like the way that the turn signals are on the, like at a Cougar Eliminator. I do like those. Ram Air history continued. Early 68 Ram ports had a hot cam. It was officially named Ram Air 2. 427 Cammer XB Falcon Coupe. There you go. Have you ever compared two throttle bodies on top of a high ram to one in front? Yes, I have. The lid that is on the 2 4-hole throttle body lid flows more than so if you have enough motor to go with it, the 2 4-hole throttle body lid flows more than the single throttle body inlet does. I didn't do like an airflow distribution thing or a fuel distribution thing to see if it was, if we got even filling from all of those from doing that. I can tell you that when you put carburetors on top of it, it makes even more power. The Torino is a nice car until Clint Eastwood gave it away. I like specifically the Torino Talladega because I like the changes that they made to make it more aero make it super racy. Would be cool, but I'm still a sucker for the 429. The Ford Escort Mark 1s and 2s were the best Fords ever. I want a Cosworth version. Round ports flow more on the intake side by a decent amount. Big jump over the D ports in stock form. Unfortunately, there were never any big block production cars made in Australia. So not Ford or Chevy. No big blocks there. Cougar. To know where you fit the motor. I did a 351 Cleveland one once. Almost no room between the shock towers for pipes or plugs. And you could get in the Eliminator, couldn't you get a 427 FE motor in those? Remember, 4 intakes had 1/8-inch port raised. No big blocks in Australia. Bummer. I have a Cleveland in my 67 Cougar, easy to reach the plugs. That came with 390s and 428s. The GTE had the 427 in it, 67, 68. What Thumper? What Cleveland is in your 67? Cougar Eliminator, yeah, with the 427. That was cool. It had the little spoiler on it and stuff. It was all fancy. Cougars get big points for rollback headlight covers. Yeah. The hideaway light stuff was always cool. You could get those on Camaros too. Get the ones, I guess they kind of suck in from back behind. Those were things that went out on occasion. Ford Cobra is the best they ever made. Be pretty easy to argue that point. Yeah, I mean, in favor of that point, I would agree with that. Currently, it's a 2V from a 71 Mustang Fastback. 4V fits just as easy. They just use the same headers as a 67 to 73 Mustang. Okay. The 4V shouldn't change anything, right? I mean, is the exhaust location in a different spot on a 4V head? I know that obviously the intake port's going to change. I just didn't know if the facing on I've never looked at that. If the facing on the 2V head is in exactly the same location as it is on the 4V head. 267s, one was a stocker, 3 on the floor. 289 had an original GTE hood and scoop. Wow. You don't want people picking on you thinking you have a GTE with a big block in it and you've got a 2-barrel 289. I guess it could be worse. Although I don't know. That probably was the base engine for that, I would imagine. I want to see somebody run a 221. A 221, or even, I guess a 260 would be cool too, but a 221 would be even more other guys. Little tiny thing. All right, Chris, we'll see you. If you guys haven't taken a look, I put a video up today on what's it worth, and we did cylinder heads. So the cylinder heads I tested we did a set of stock versus Airflow Research 245s on a 408. I meant to, and I had it set up when I was doing the video. I was also going to include ported stock 243 heads, which made less than the Airflow Research head, which we would expect, but still did really well and still gained a whole bunch over the stock 241. I compared that on the 408 to a set of stock 241 LS1 heads. That was our baseline head. And we know that the 706 head's just a little bit better than that. I also tested the stock 706 heads versus the trickle heads on the Turbo 4.8. We talked about that yesterday. I also tested stock LS3 heads versus CNC ported GM Performance LS3 heads on a stock LS3. And then what happened when we put the cam in it, and then I ran those same heads and compared them to stock LS3 heads on a 468 stroker. And that's where we saw a huge difference in power, because now the motor could take advantage of all of that extra airflow that the ported version of the head had to offer, because our even a cammed LS3 is not going to take advantage of that, because the 468 made like 720. So it was putting all of that airflow to good use. It's nuts. I know Ford stuff. Knowledge is power. That's right. I've forgotten most of the trivial. It's fun talking about it. Your poor taste in Mustang is counterbalanced with your Cougar love. So I got the yin and yang going on there. Cougars are still undervalued. I agree. I think I would much rather have a Cougar than most of the Mustangs, but there are Mustangs that I would really like too. I missed the head test today. I have to go back and check it out. Yeah, I just put it up. I put it up a little earlier today. The little 67 3-speed was perfect. Fun little car, $250 junkyard gem. No, that's ideal. My Camaro, my 70 Camaro, was a base 2-barrel motor. I can't remember. I'm trying to remember if somebody that I knew back in the day had a Cougar. I thought somebody did when I was in high school. Custom 67, 68 Cougar convertibles are good. I'm actually not a big fan of convertibles for most of them. 69, 70 Mustangs are the best Mustangs. I want a 70 Cougar, but not bad enough to find one. I'll go with the 67. I need to look at the Cougars to see in more detail to see if there's a body style that I like better that speaks to me. Like the Chevelles. I like most of the Chevelles. I'm not a big fan of the square ones. So I like the 69 style, but then the one that I really like is 70 to 70, 71, 72, I think. I don't know if did it continue that same body style in 73. What year F body has a split bumper? The one that I own does. Mine was a 70 and a half. If you had to guess, do you believe the Summit Pro LS rods are made by K1? They look similar and near the same price range, but they don't give the details, just like the house producers of Jegs cams. I don't know. I don't know who makes those. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. I mean, you wouldn't make a rod company just so that you can sell rods. You would go have them done by somebody else. A friend of mine built a 68 convertible Cougar, came out nice, used Mustang stuff to do it. Of a 94 351 block, our AFR Enforcer head's good for street use. Yes, that's a good choice. So, and shout out to the guys at Airflow and Scat and Vortec and Brian Tooley Racing for helping out with the channel. 70 to 81 Firebird Camaro. Camaros are parts cars for for rusty Firebirds. Wow, shots fired on the Firebird guys, or on the Camaro guys. I mean, the Firebirds, particularly the Trans Ams, are where we used to go get all of our suspension parts for the Camaros. Because mine was a base car, it was a rally sport, but not. I don't think it didn't even have an F41 suspension or anything on it. So we went to the wrecking yard and found a WS6 Trans Am and started taking everything off of it. I want a 69 Eldorado. What does LSA mean? It means lobe separation angle. And it's the distance between the center of the intake lobe and the center of the exhaust lobe. Aren't those Enforcer heads the best head you can use with stock pistons, valve size, and aftermarket heads on roller 351 Windsor stuff? I don't know. I thought that the Enforcer head was a 202 valve. So if it is, and depending on the valve relief, you could run into trouble there if you have a lot of camshaft. WS6 is awesome stuff for the Camaros, but the aero is so bad on the Camaro. Yeah, I agree. I thought the Firebirds, they did a much better job on making them look better. Of 2 words, Smokey and the Bandit. Yeah. Rockford Files. I liked Rockford Files. I like watching the show, but his car, that Camaro or that Firebird or whatever it was that a Camaro? I think it was a Firebird, right? Was not anywhere near what Smokey and the Bandit was or Hooper was, or I would argue even Knight Rider. Faster I go with my birds, the more stable they feel. So much driving with a WS6. '73 was the first year for the Colonnade A bodies. Poverty Pack Firebird. Yeah, what was that thing? What year was Rockford's Firebird? Was it mid to late 70s? Last day for summer cyber sale tonight. We've continued our Black Friday to Cyber Monday sale. We've rolled it over into a holiday sale. So we're going to try to continue it. So on richardholderperformance.com, we're continuing that sale to try to help people out for Christmas. Because let's face it, we don't want socks. We don't want a tie. We don't want any of that stuff. We want a camshaft. We want springs. We want lifters. We want all of that stuff for Christmas. 69 Firebird was almost a mid-engine car. Front spark plug was in line with the spindles. 64.5 Mustang building a Boss engine. Nice. Remind folks of how the big ports were on the Boss. Same size as my Redport 188 heads. They are a good size. Formula Firebird 77. Okay. Did several Firebirds, started with a 74, ended with a 78, if I remember right. Usually base, but sometimes the Esprit. Ooh. I voted yes, but imagine a Camry and a Mustang or a Maverick. Yeah. Do you build motors for customers? I don't. I build mine that I run on the dyno. Everybody wants a big turbo for Christmas. Also good. It's not like there's a bad choice for car guy stuff. It's a Holley 850 Ultra XP, good for street use on a 351 with AFR Enforcer heads, or stick with a 750. Well, you'd have to tell me what the other things are. Probably an 850, I'm thinking, is going to be overkill unless you have a very, very big camshaft and a single plane intake manifold on there. But probably not. So if you don't have that stuff, if you have a dual plane and a milder cam, a 750 is going to be more than enough. Wish I would have bought your low buck truck before I bought my Summit cam. Definitely recommend the cam. The Summit stuff is good too. Camera and a Maverick. Yep, that would be good. Someone get this man a dyno and a cam grinder. I don't want to have my own dyno because the expense of that, people don't even realize all the stuff that happens for the dyno. The dyno is inexpensive. I could go buy a dyno tomorrow, but the room to put it in and all the other things that you need is way more than the dyno costs. I think I heard there were formulas in the studio, turned them into Esprits. Might be wrong. I mean, for what he was doing, they could have been, well, in the late 70s, they wouldn't have been. Oh, they could have been 305s because my friend had a 305 in his Firebird, and I think his Firebird was a 78. 400 D ports, had decent valves. Pontiac machine the combustion chambers to clean the engine to avoid air injection. Wow. How did they machine them? Did they? Because did they have CNC machines back then? They were sprees. They did it in a mill. They did it by hand in a milling machine. Man, that's labor intensive. Who else really enjoyed the World's Fastest Indian? I'm part of that group. Hello. Really made my dad think about amazing motors in general, how each motor can be changed. I'm the opposite. I have the room, but no dyno money. Chamber sizes are very consistent. And it's not just room, it's the money. Because you have to make the building very specific. And you have to have pumps and tanks and lions and tigers and bears. Is a billet wheel older model 78, 75 versus VS Turbo worth $100 to $150 more than a cast wheel setup? For what power level? If you're just doing 600 or 700 horsepower and the cast wheel will do that, I wouldn't consider the billet wheel. If you're trying to max out the cast wheel and then the billet wheel can get you a little bit more than that, then yeah. Richard, what is lifter preload and how is it determined? The amount of preload that you would run is probably determined by the lifter manufacturer. But for us, for regular people, it's mostly just a half a turn, and that puts enough lifter preload in it. Unless it's a short travel lifter, then the preload is going to be very, very precise because you don't have a lot of room to play with. You just want to make sure that there's enough preload that you don't have lash. Remember, my engine builder would always laugh when dialing ponchos and deports. They were doing chamber work. He said they were artwork and didn't want to mess with them. Tim, I don't know if there's no way to know unless somebody tested it whether the billet wheel would have better response, because it's probably not going to have response change from weight. I don't I don't really agree with that. I don't think that has I agree with it. I don't think that it has nearly as much of an effect as a change in the wheel design. Sometimes people break your dyno. They do. Ponchos were superior. Pontiac guys. So does that mean that any Pontiac head that I go look at has a machined chamber? Is that what you're saying? Is that what I'm getting from this? Video a couple of weeks back about engine dynos compared to chassis dynos, and didn't get a chance to ask if you have tested solid engine mounts comparing to bushing style engine mounts and a horsepower. I don't think you'll see a horsepower difference from that. You'd have to have a lot of deflection for that to cause anything. We know that because we've run stuff on the dyno where the motor has moved because of the mounts that we put on it, and it didn't change the horsepower. So would the factory torque procedure work for most people using stock lifters and a stockish cam? Even an aftermarket cam, it doesn't matter. The lifter is, you're still going to preload the lifter the same. So if you have a stock cam, you preload the lifter like a half a turn on a hydraulic cam, whether it's a flat tappet or a hydraulic roller, as long as it's a standard travel lifter in both cases, which they normally are. And so it doesn't matter. Like with LS's, we take the cam out, put another cam in, put a BTR cam in, or my low buck truck camshaft or whatever, put that in, and then put the stock lifters back in, and we still give it the same amount of preload. And there's a pretty good range, like on the LS, if you look at the push rod measuring video that I did, which is essentially lifter preload, you have a big variance that will all work. 67 400, 67 headed 454 can pass 79 emissions without a cat. Machine chambers, valve cover. Why would the valve cover rail have anything to do with emissions? Any Pontiac head in the era of air injection up until 1971 or so was machined. I don't know if the straight six was though. So it has to be before 71 then, right? When's the 3800 Big Bang coming? I don't know. With stock rockers and valve stem heights, proper preload for a Pontiac is 20 foot-pounds. How do you get preload in foot-pounds? I don't understand that. Is there a better test to look for bent push rods other than rolling them on a flat table and inspecting them? If you have known straight push rods, you can roll them against another push rod, but the flat table or glass works really good. Are the Speedmaster 351 heads any good? I don't know. The ones that I've tested have not been great, so I would probably pick something else. I'm not sure in post 71. I didn't mess with smog motors. I was just looking at the heads that I have, and it doesn't look like any of the chambers are machined. The Cleveland 351 and now 4.8 makes great power. Torque the rocker nuts to 20 foot-pounds with all the stock stuff. What is a rocker nut torque against? Isn't it a pinch nut? And if you're tightening your rocker nut, I'm still not understanding how you get torque out of I'm trying to think of any rocker assembly that I've ever done that I can understand torquing a bolt down rocker, but the torque value of the bolt retaining the rocker has nothing to do with the preload, though. I heard you mention adding ring gap for boosted engines. Would you mind explaining the difference? What happens to the rings when you add boost? You put more heat in the ring, so the ring has gap in it, and you put more heat in the ring, and then when you put heat in it, the ring grows, and then the gap goes together, and then it snaps the piston. Bottleneck studs. You don't do Pontiac valves like a Chevy. I'll have to look at the 350 that I did and see. Been watching for some time. I just happened to open YouTube and saw you're on live, so I wanted to quick say hi. Thanks for all the research. Happy to help. Happy to help, yo. I run a 351 Cleveland 2V with a T5 box and a Cobra. Oh, cool. Yeah, Thumper, you need to do those videos. I just need to look at the rocker setup on the 350 to figure out what you're talking about. Right now, I just can't visualize it. Let's go to Pontiac. Let's go to Pontiac photos, and then none of that stuff is going to be available because it's all going to be an HEIC file. Silly stuff. Yeah, I can't look at any of that. Curse that iPhone. Any Buick 3800 parts for sale? Probably have blowers or something. All right, and I will have the pulleys and hubs and stuff, but not right now. Not till after we run the more stuff. Pontiac made exhaust crossover separate from the aluminum intake. I remember seeing that. That's a neat design. Just an idea. Maybe if possible, it would be a good idea to have links to your uploads showing you installing cams or accessories like springs and push rod measuring for potential buyer instruction. You mean have links on the store that go to those? Jimmy and I talked about that. We didn't know if we wanted people going away from the store. We'd rather have them coming to the store. But I think that would be valuable information for those people. How many puppies? I don't have any puppies. Well, I have two, but they're 2-year-olds, and they're both males. The puppies that I showed the video of are actually puppies that my 2-year-old, one of the 2-year-old males, sired. And so she, when they were old enough, she brought them over so that we could play with puppies, which is awesome. The factory studs are 3/8 and they have a shoulder on them where the nut stops. As long as the heads aren't milled more than 40, they work the same on all but the Rammer 5. So the rocker gets just bolted down to that stop, right? To the shoulder. 3,800 cars aftermarket airbox versus gutted stockers. Also, I thought you did a big bang on the 3,800 already. I didn't. We made 600 and something, 10 or 20 or 30 horsepower with it, with a turbo on it, but not a big bang. Pontiac made 366 for NASCAR and 428 for NHRA. My 2015 LS 6-liter is having issues with low oil pressure. Just watch your video from 4 years ago. The O-ring was changed about a year ago. Could it be that again? The O-rings don't normally go out. I mean, I still have the original one in my car that has 350 plus thousand miles on it. So I wouldn't think an O-ring would go bad unless you damaged it installing it. Leave them loose and they will back off and you'll mess up push rods. But then on that setup, the shoulder position that the rocker bolts to is going to determine the preload, right? The nut just tightens that down, just holds it in place, right? The only way to change that relationship between the rocker and the push rod and the lifter and the valve tip is to loosen that bolt up, right? And you don't want lash in it. So you just bolt it down all the way, and then the torque value on the nut or the fastener isn't determining preload. It's that shoulder position, right? Am I getting that right? The Ford Cammer is the Hemi equivalent. I would agree with that. I'd like to see what, if anybody knows, does anybody know what a Cammer head flows relative to a Hemi head? I'd like to see that. My guess is that the Cammer heads flow more than a Hemi head does, but I don't know that for certain. I don't know that that's true. If the 427 Camry was a production motor, would the 427 Camry Torino be the best car Ford ever made? 52 versus 48. So still, that's almost half and half. It's close. A little more. Ford Camry's a wide engine. Headers will be tight to fill the engine bay. Yeah, that's the case. And it particularly for, Mustang applications. Even a 390 FE was tight in a Mustang. Dakota, what's going on? '70 Ram Air 5 was approved for RPO, but the rods were outsourced to a vendor who went bankrupt before he could fully machine and meet the projected production numbers. A Ram Air 5 400 with those heads on it? If you're running a small base circle cam or need more lift that requires longer valves. Was the 427 camera ever homologated? No, I don't think that NASCAR ever allowed it, and it was not a production engine anyways. Eric said to temporarily overfill an LS, put the oil level above the O-ring if the low oil pressure problem goes away, it's a bad O-ring. That the O-ring level is going to be really high, though. That's going to be way overfilled, and then your rotating assembly is just going to be beating that oil to death. The oil level is going to be up against the crankshaft. BS. Did NHRA allow the camera to be used? Not as a production thing, though, right? Where do you find the injector specs when you're going to start tuning a new set of injectors? You get them normally from who you buy them from. Fill oil till it comes out the carburetor. We have filled oil till it's come out the valve cover, because we had one that was already full, and then we filled it up even more. And this was on a Honda. You'd end up with foamy oil with that much overfilled from the crank, turning it into yeah, it'd be that would be bad. Holly dropped. I like the idea, but I thought he was going to say pressurize it or something. Holly drop-down menu on the free download often helps menu with injector specs or from the manufacturer directly. Pontiac had a camera 421. They built in 62. Like the flow rate and injector pulse width and all that. Well, the pulse width is going to be a function of the of how much fuel you need for your application. But injector flow rate comes with the injectors that you buy. That's an easy thing. Sometimes tuners want more information than that. They want injector slope, basically what the thing flows at a whole bunch of different positions. And I guess that helps them with maybe a factory ECU. We don't normally bother with that on the aftermarket ECU stuff, but just run the LS at idle for a minute, long enough to verify the O-ring. According to Wyotech tests, the domestic market didn't have overhead cams till the 80s. What would be a good cam to look at for a 351 Cleveland M code to get 300 to 350 wheel horsepower? Well, take a look. I have cam upgrades that we did both on the Boss motor and on the hydraulic flat tappet 1971. I thought it was a Cobra Jet, but I may have mislabeled it. But we did cam upgrades on those. We did Complins, and they worked pretty well. But it was pretty easy to get over 400 flywheel horsepower. Do you know anyone who has a set of Mickey Thompson Hemi heads for the Pontiac? I have not seen those. Holly was more manageable with the fuel flow rate stuff. It all relies on you having the correct fuel pressure listed on the menu when you click and save. I know early on, those things didn't make any difference. You could put whatever injector size in there you want, and it had no effect on the fuel flow, which I thought was weird. And the other thing that it didn't do is if you had 19-pound injectors or 20-pound injectors, and then you put 80s in there, you should be able to change the injector size in the software, and it should automatically calculate that for you. And they didn't do that. It didn't do any of that. Looking to put a 6-liter in an 09 CTS. What kind of can do you think would be best for a daily driver? The same thing that I always recommend for daily driver stuff. You should get my low buck truck camshaft, or Truck Norris or Chupacabra, that style of camshaft. Boss 351 cam video. Yeah, I have Boss 351 videos up, and then I have modified versions of that also. The camera was approved for NASCAR in '66. You set the Holly software for 44, it's really 45. The Holly computer and SS1 pressure sensor won't modify the tune for it, their techs say. I just know when we were testing these that when we would change, if you just change the injector, like if you just change the injector size, like if I'm running a motor and the air fuel is perfect and I change the injector size, it didn't do anything. It had no effect on fuel flow. And I'm not running it in closed loop. I'm running it in open loop. So it's not self-compensating based on the O2 sensor. It didn't do anything. That part of their menu had no effect on fueling. And I think that they changed that subsequently. But for a long time, injector size had no effect. You could put in anything in there you want. I wonder if that could be the problem of low oil pressure on earlier question. So it would have its own pulse width correction based on air fuel alone. Yeah, if we were running something in closed loop, we didn't care about whatever injector size we were putting in there. We would just run it closed loop, and it would just tune to whatever air fuel number we were asking it to do. I didn't do that a lot. I didn't run it under closed loop. I would run it under open loop, and I would just make the adjustments that were necessary. Got one more minute. BS, thank you for the camera history. With harmonic balancers on 350 Chevys or 351 Fords, is there much difference between the bigger and smaller sizes? The performance guys tend to use the bigger ones, which seems odd because you'll make more power with a smaller one because there's less parasitic loss associated with driving that bigger, the bigger, heavier damper. But it's supposed to dampen better. And I wouldn't be concerned with either one of those if you're doing stock dampeners anyways. But make sure that your timing setup, your indicator works with the size dampener that you have. Bill France imposed a pound per cubic inch minimum on the camera. That was the that was the rewards weight. That doesn't look like rewards. I remember we used to get that when I was racing touring car. That's what they called it. Here's rewards weight. You won, so here's your reward. Here's another extra 100 pounds. My God, I don't want that. William, so you've got a 98 Riviera stock bottom. Is that a 3800? CZP, GT 3582, MSD 85, 1087, 128. Is that in a front wheel drive car? That's pretty stout. Are you blowing through the blower, or is it just a turbo blowing into some other kind of manifold? 1087, that's good. That's motoring. Have you run that thing on the dyno at all? Or how much boost are you running? It's like, then I can just calculate it. Just figure that out in my head. Oh, a blower housing? Okay. 20 pounds. Okay. That's making good power then. A 3582. I'm surprised that turbo will make 20 pounds on that motor. Oh, and you have nitrous. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. And you know what else makes sense? It's time to go. So if you haven't, go look at the video that I put up on what cylinder heads do, so you can learn everything that there is to know about how cylinder heads work and how much power they add to an LS. And it depends on which one you're putting it on. I will see you guys all later.